You're listening to Wanderlust Diaries, the ultimate travel podcast for solo female travellers 40 and beyond who are ready to explore the world. Join me, Terry Reynolds, where we talk all things travel and why it's so important and what's stopping you from getting out there and exploring the world. We'll discuss the steps you can take now to fix it, empowering you to ignite your curiosity and set your heart free so that you have the confidence to travel wherever you want, whenever you want. Offering insights, tips, hacks, and remarkable women's stories along the way. So come on, grab your passport, pack your sense of adventure, and get ready to be inspired. Whether you're a first-time solo traveller or a seasoned globetrotter, Wanderlust Diaries is your community of like-minded souls, uplifting and supporting women over 40 who dare to explore. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am very pleased to say that today's guest is the Sahara Rose DeVore. Sahara is a wellness travel coach and the founder of the Travel Coach Network, a global community of travel coaches. Sahara went from being a broke college student to travelling to 84 countries solo. I hope you've still got your original passport. To becoming the CEO of her travel businesses. She believes that there is more to travel career than just blogging and booking trips. Sahara is also a published author, global speaker, TEDx speaker, and has been in over 175 media outlets for her travel and business expertise, including Forbes, Travel Weekly, Condé Nast Traveller, and CNN Travel. Sahara was also named one of 2023's most influential women in travel by Travel Pulse. So Sahara, thank you so much for coming onto the Wanderlust Diaries podcast today. There's such a lot to discuss. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No, you are more than welcome. Like I said, there's a lot to discuss. So before we get into it, would you like to share a little bit about you with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I didn't come from a family that traveled very much for business or for leisure or for business. My grandmother actually passed away before she ever went on a plane. And so being able to travel just wasn't something that I thought that I could do. It never really crossed my mind. I grew up as an only child with a single mom. And we didn't have very much money to travel. Our extent of traveling was in the family van down to Mexico, and then up to visit my grandmother's family, and then up to Canada to visit my grandfather's family. And it wasn't until I had heard about this concept of backpacking Europe when I was in high school. And my best friend at the time and I were like, that sounds cool. Maybe we can do that before we go to college. And as a lot of people feel like, before they go to university, maybe we should take a gap year. But also, like many people, that doesn't happen. So we didn't do that. I went into university, but I was never someone who knew what my career path was going to be. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life for a career. And luckily for the first couple of years of university, you have required classes, you try different topics out. And then my third year university, I was transferring to another school back closer to where I'm from. And I came across a hospitality and tourism management program. And I applied and I got in because I said, hey, who doesn't like to travel? That sounds interesting. So it was in that program, that 2 years that I was in that program, that I was really inspired to travel. It was in the time that I had learned about, all of the foreign exchange students that were in my class and how easy it was for them to travel, throughout Southeast Asia where they're from, or through Europe. Being from the States, it's so much harder to be able to get to other countries because we're such a massive and isolated country over here. So, but I was a broke college student, like you mentioned, and I had no idea how I was going to do that. And so changing my money mindset, I was able to save enough money once I graduated to be able to start traveling.
Okay, so you said that there's a lot there. So you said you changed your money mindset. So what did you have to do to be able to change? Because it's not easy, is it? Changing any mindset. There's always a bit of something that you need to do. So what was it for you that changed your mindset around money so that you could then go and travel?
Well, a couple different things. One, I was living in an expensive city of Chicago. And like I said, I'm an only child from a single mom. And she, I didn't want to turn to her financially, and she didn't always have the means to help me out financially. But I was living, paying rent. I could barely be able to pay my rent because it was expensive where I was living. So that's why I say I was this broke college student who was struggling to be able to just afford living and, going to school. I was just like anyone else without anyone to help me out. And I'm also someone who never really wanted anyone to be able to help me out financially in any way too. And so that's why I decided I had to figure out, how can I change this mindset I have around money? What is it that I can do that gets me out of this situation where I can have the money to travel and not feel like I'm, feeling stuck or I need to depend on someone else. So when I say change my money mindset, is as simple as I took a look at my time. What was I outside of school? I was still in school full time. And I still had 2 years left of school. Um, what was I doing? What jobs, what did my calendar look like? What kind of jobs could I get? How was I spending my money? What was I spending my money on? So I downsized where I can. So things like I called my phone company to see if I could lower my phone bill. I got rid of my cable TV at the time. And, this was back before streaming and all these other things. I didn't have a car anymore. I used coupons for groceries. And then I started picking up as many jobs as I could. At one point I was working 5 jobs while in school full time, and they're very flexible jobs. So I'd pick up babysitting shifts where I could, or I'd be on call for staffing companies for events. So if I was available, I would work them, and they're all good paying jobs. So I started working so much that I was saving money versus spending money. And money is all a mindset as well. I had many friends who ultimately I started working in the restaurant industry in Chicago, which became very lucrative. And I was able to kind of remove all those other jobs, or most of them. And I had friends working with that made money, great money too, and spent it on other things and could barely pay the rent. So my goal was to make money and save it. So when I graduated school, I had money to go and travel. So for the 2 years, I kept my eye on that goal.
I love that. And you're absolutely right, because when you make your mind up that that's something you want to do, it is a mindset. And therefore, you can't have it all. So what are you going to do to make sure that you do have enough money to get you at least started? And I was the same. I was saving for about 16 months before I went off backpacking for the year. And I didn't go out. I literally didn't go out. I didn't do anything. I literally saved all my money. I was a lot older than you. I was 39, when I went. So I was able to live with family, so I didn't have to pay my rent either. So it's about finding those different ways, isn't it? Those subtle ways of making sure that you can save your money ready to go. So all right, then let's go back to there. And so you've saved your money and you want to go off. How are you feeling? Because what I want to do is I want our listeners, especially female listeners, of around about the age of 40. Now I know that's not your genre, because you were a lot younger when you went, but I just think that everybody's got that kind of anxiety, a little bit of fear. If you've never done it before, there are some that can just go and do it and they don't have that fear. But I want our listeners to understand that it doesn't really matter what age you are. When you embark on something like this, it's massive, and you are going to have those some anxiety around that. So how did you deal with those feelings?
Yeah, that's very understandable. Traveling is not easy for everyone, and not everyone has to be a global backpacker and sell all their belongings and travel to 84 countries. But taking a trip in its own can be stressful or cause anxiety. or let alone going on a solo adventure. So, of any length. So those feelings, those limiting beliefs are definitely there. But for me, I knew that I didn't have really any other choice than to take this adventure for myself. Um, Reason being is because once I graduated from university, I was 22 years old, and this was when I was planning of going on this European trip. I was only planning to go for a month and a half, and I have always struggled with an anxiety disorder. So I've always had, this internal feeling of anxiety. And during the last year and a half of being in university, I also had been experiencing bouts of depression. So I was in this place mentally once I graduated of, okay, now I have this sense of freedom. Who am I? What do I want to do with my life? And I could either, in the big city of Chicago, there are so many different options and jobs available, especially in tourism and hospitality, which I studied. But I knew that taking a corporate job and sitting in an office and having someone dictate my schedule, my calendar, when I could go on a vacation or not, was not going to make me happy. So why would I add more stress upon my already unhappiness? So I knew that I needed to figure out what happiness looked like for myself. So I felt like I didn't really have a choice. And I think that, did I know that travel was going to lead me to the life that I have today? Absolutely not. But I knew that sticking in one place and doing the same thing in my life over and over again was not going to do that for me. So I didn't know where I would end up or what I would learn or what I'd experience. And like I said, I thought I was going to go for a month and a half. I bought a Euro pass at the time, so it allowed for 30 something days of traveling. And that's why I was going to say I would come back home and then I would figure out my life. But I fell in love with what travel is doing for me. So going back to your question you have to ask yourself of like, how bad do you want it? If you didn't go on this trip, what would your life look like? If you didn't take this adventure, how would you feel? And it's more of asking those internal questions versus, can I afford it? Do I have time? What are the logistics? Where am I going to go? Because all of that will fall into place and you will make the time and you will find the money for it if you want it bad enough. So it's really less about giving this empowerment of go, it's safe, you'll do fine, you'll have great experiences, and more about, because travel is so transformative internally for us, do you want to find these answers for yourself bad enough? And if so, this adventure could be that reason, that way for you to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes to everything you just said. And for me, it was a case of I was in such of that routine, that I was going to work. It was that, eat, sleep, work, repeat type mode. And I thought I've just got to do something different. And I knew that if I didn't, the fear of not doing that something so different that took me so far out of my comfort zone, because I'd never even, the year before I'd been abroad with a girlfriend. That's the first time I'd been anywhere, on my own. So, and it's a massive thing. But like I said, it was the fear of not doing it was worse than the fear of actually getting on that plane, and going. And so, so that's great, because I think everybody, no matter what your age, that is what is going to go through your mind. You're going to get a little bit of fear. You're going to get a little bit of anxiety. But like you said, it depends how much you want something. And if you want it really badly, you will make those sacrifices and you'll put those fears to one side. You'll deal with them. Because believe me, once you get there and you get on that plane, all of that just disappears, doesn't it? Once you get to wherever it is you're going to, all of those initial fears just melt away. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I actually, the first night, I remember my first two trips in particular, I was questioning what the heck I was doing when I arrived there. So my very first trip I landed first in Ireland when I was going to Europe, and I was staying with a family of a friend. And to kind of cushion the blow, it was my first time going anywhere. I was 22 years old. So at least I was with a family who was familiar and was able to show me around. They were wonderful. It was so great. I was able to do that. But I remember crying that first night in bed in their room, being like, what am I doing? Can I do this? And the same thing with when I came back from Europe, I repacked a bag, spent the holidays with my mom, and then bought a one-way ticket to Costa Rica and went to Central America. And I remember I was couch surfing for that first time. And I remember the same thing that night being like, what am I doing? Can I do this again? And after that, that feeling went away. So for me, it took a little bit more time. During those 2 trips in particular, that feeling did go away pretty quickly. But as a whole, for every time I traveled, I'd say by that 3rd trip, I no longer was questioning, what am I doing? I just knew that this is what I'm meant to be doing right now.
And don't you, by the time you're on that 3rd trip, how, you know that you might get that anxiety or that fear, but it'll go as well, because what's going to come, and you're just going to have such a great time. Did you, I'm going to admit that when I left, I was with somebody just for a few weeks. And I also have to be honest about the fact that if I hadn't had somebody to go with, I probably wouldn't have gone on such a huge trip. Because originally I was just going to go to Greece for 6 months and work in Greece, and then it all changed. So, I did have somebody to start with. And then when I got to Australia, I did have some family there for a couple of weeks before I went off on my travel. So if you can cushion that blow a little bit by either meeting somebody, because we've all got people around the world these days, haven't we? So if you're going somewhere and you know somebody there, make arrangements to meet with them. And always have that. I always had, whenever I was going somewhere new for the first time, I always had my first night's accommodation booked. So that when I knew that I landed, or if I was traveling within a country to a different area, I knew I had that first night, and that was a bit of comfort. That was to know that, and I, made me confident that I had that first night booked. Is that something you did as well?
In my later years, yes. When I first started traveling in 2010, we didn't have websites like booking.com and Hostel World and all the apps that we have today. So I remember, no, I didn't. I would knock on doors of hostels and see if they had beds available. I talked to other people if they knew of a hostel in sight. Then I learned that, yes, it gave me a bit of a peace of mind when I was going to a new destination, that I would have something in mind written down, or at least write down or booked, or have a couple places written down so I can go and find where they're at and see if they, because that does cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress traveling. But nowadays we have so many resources available to us to make our travel planning so much easier.
Oh, doesn't it just? I went in 1999. So we definitely didn't have mobile phones or internet then. And so I took my trusty rough guides, which were probably about this thick each. And I had for each country I was going into. So I'd be looking through there to see where to go. And then to phone anywhere, used to be able to buy a phone card, and there'd be like 3,000 numbers on there that you had to punch in to get through. And if you put one number wrong, you'd have to start again. It used to be so frustrating. But yes, no, I know what you're saying. These days it's fantastic, isn't it? Because it's so easy just to go on. You've just got your phone. You don't need anything else. You've got your phone to find where you can go, what you're doing, where you want to go, book everything well in advance if you want to. But it's also nice, isn't it, to have that spontaneity as well, of not actually knowing all the time of where you're going.
Yeah, so I did not plan out what I was doing at all. What I would actually do is I would print out a map from my mom's office computer of the region of the world I was going to. So maybe the continent. If I was going to South America, it'd be of South America. If it was Western Europe, it'd be Western Europe. Southeast Asia, of Southeast Asia. So I literally I'd have, of course, booked and planned my first destination and place to stay. And then I would talk to people and go from there. I'd take a look at this map and say, what's nearby? What's a good place to go to? I heard this is great. Yeah, pinpoint, and I'll go there. That's how I spent my journeys solo backpacking. And some of the best destinations I visited were through word of mouth, by someone sleeping in the bunk bed below me, or that I was talking to on a bus ride, or that I met in the common room in a hostel area and had told me where they came from or where they love to go.
Oh, I love that. I know it's fantastic, isn't it? Because I was reading an article the other day about age. and how old people are when they're traveling, and people kind of 40 plus think can't do that. You're too old to be doing that, 40, 50, 60. But when I went, I was around like 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, however old you were at the time, and they really accepted me, and it was fantastic. They kept me young, actually. So I found that absolutely wonderful. I loved it, because I think when you travel like that, you're quite young at heart anyway. I think you've got to be, to do something like that. So yes, I think that being able to do that, having that mindset of doing that, and not to be worried that you're going to be the old. I was almost always the oldest on the bus, in the party, in the hostel, whatever. I was. But I just didn't care. I was having such a great time, and you can't let things like that concern you or worry you. Did you meet, as you were traveling around, many older people?
Yeah, I mean, in my hostels, there's people of all ages, and it also depends on what areas of the world it is, because a lot of people will turn to hostels because they're so much more affordable than hotels would be. So it depends. If it was like a cheaper destination, usually older people would book like a private room somewhere because it was just affordable. But other times that they'd if it was a pricier area for hotels, there would be a lot of older people in my hostels with us. But I found a wide range of things. I even took my mom when we went to, I took her traveling to Thailand. I've taken her to South Africa. I've taken her to Australia, New Zealand, and we stayed in hostels everywhere. And she, her and her friends, and they loved it. My mom loved to cook for the, in the common room, backpackers, especially boys that are younger, will love free food, and, and there's anything they don't have to pay for. So she kind of became the hostel mom. But there was a wide range of, people traveling. And that's one of the beautiful things about traveling and travelers themselves, is that it's not about your age or where you come from, or your income level, or any of these traditional demographics that the industry has always kind of categorized people in. It's more about, why are you on this journey, and what is travel doing for you? And we share that commonality with people, no matter what age they are. And I've learned from a lot of older people traveling as well. I remember being on a bus in Myanmar, on a little bus in Myanmar, and a couple came on, and they were sitting next to me, and we were just talking, and they were asking me what I was doing, and I just said, I'm just backpacking. And they're like, well, we just retired and we started traveling. We wish we've done what you're doing, and we wish we had started back then. And I remember that made such a big imprint on me, because I was like, I don't want to live with regrets. I don't want to be a certain age and say, I wish I had gone back and done this, because we don't have that opportunity in life. Of course, you can start anything at any time in your life that you want, but you're only given so much time. And so I learned from a lot of people traveling of, what kind of life I wanted to have, and what I wanted to do with myself and my career and everything like that too. So travel itself is just a big eye opener in so many different ways.
No, you're absolutely right. There is a transformation, isn't there, at the end of it? And for me, it was coming back, and I knew I couldn't just go back to the same old thing. I knew I couldn't do that. I was working in the NHS, and I still am, at the time, and they gave me a career break for a year, which was fantastic. And but I knew when I went back, I couldn't continue just doing the same thing. And I went off to uni, and and I'd never been to uni before, so I went to uni at the age of 40, 42, 44, something like that. The traveling gave me the confidence. I would never have done that before that, So, and there are lessons learned from it. There is a transformation, and for you then, because obviously you have businesses now, and so at what point did you realize that actually I want to go? I don't just want to be traveling any longer. I now can turn this experience into something good for others.
Yeah. Well, as I was traveling, obviously, in the back of your mind is always going to be, what am I going to do for a career path? Like, And like I said, I never was someone who knew, I didn't have clarity on that. I had this degree in hospitality and tourism management, but I knew I didn't want any of the jobs I had learned about. I didn't want to work in hotels. I didn't want to plan and book trips for people as a travel agent. I had experience planning and booking trips for people and groups and my mom and her friends. And it caused, like I said, I have anxiety. It caused me more anxiety having the responsibility of someone's itinerary. And it didn't bring me joy. I didn't want to be a flight attendant. I didn't want to live on an airplane. I wanted to be able to experience the places I'm going to and have the freedom of going where I want, when I wanted. So I always gave myself, I was doing just fine with, I never worked while I traveled. I'd go back home, I'd make some money, visit my mom for the holidays, work flexible jobs, and I'd always keep a certain level in my bank account. So I did fine. For the 10 years of traveling without having to actually put pressure on myself to figure out a job or career path. But that pressure was there. So I said, when I'm 30, I'm going to figure out what I want to do. And that gave me a period of time of grace period to just enjoy my life. Then 30 came and I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. Nothing that I heard about interests me. There was the rise of all the travel technology and platforms, social media, travel influencers, blogging, travel writing, everything. But I was like, I don't like any of that stuff. I don't want to write about travel. It's not what I enjoy doing. But what else is there? There has to be something else out there. I have all this love and knowledge of travel, and I knew I loved the empowerment side of travel, and I understood how meaningful travel was on people. And so when 30 came about, it was the very first time I bought a little laptop, and I was traveling with a little laptop. I was back in Europe, and I remember being in the north of Spain in a hostel in the community center. And I opened up the laptop and I started Googling like how to start an online business. What are people doing online? What are people doing online in travel? And just doing research and really diving into business in general. I had never had to do this before. And I came across the online coaching world, which I was never exposed to before. Life coaches, health coaches, wellness, business coaches. And something inside me clicked. And I said, I want to be a travel coach. I want to empower and help people travel. And I said, and then for me, I was like, well, I like the wellness aspect for companies because I wondered why companies weren't valuing travel for employee well-being. And there became the trend of people quitting the 9-to-5 to travel. So I said, what are companies not doing that they're not recognizing how valuable and important travel is for people? So I decided to become a wellness travel coach and focus on working with companies. When I started that business, that was in 2018. When I started that business, then and was talking about it, early 2019, I had others reaching out asking about travel coaching and how did I learn about it? Where can they learn about it? And because there wasn't a platform or place to do that, again, I had a gut instinct, and that's when I started the Travel Coach Network. And so fast forward, I've been building my wellness travel coaching business and the global community of the Travel Coach Network since then.
Oh, I know, it's amazing. I'm part of that. Proud to say I'm part of it as well. And it's changed things for me, definitely. So I can, and thankfully, this is something that you created. It is a business that you created, and you're helping so many people. Now, when you went into this, though, as a travel coach, did you get many questions of what does a travel coach do? Because let me tell you now, when I Google travel coach, I get all these coach trips suddenly pop up. It's quite funny, isn't it? So I bet you got a lot of that, did you? What does a travel coach? I mean, I do. I know I do now.
Yeah. When I started with the term travel coach in 2018, I actually didn't Google or research it at all. I just knew in my heart it's what I wanted to do, and I didn't care if anyone else was doing it. I was going to define my business for myself. It wasn't until other people were asking me about travel coaching, and it was about maybe 5 people deep who finally asked me, and something clicked, and I said, well, if they are reaching out asking me, I'm sure they probably went to Google first to see what it was. Let me go to Google and see what it says. And this was probably like half a year into my business. Again, I had this gut instinct that these are what I wanted to do, and I was running with it. And again, same thing.
Mm.
Mostly travel coach buses popped up. I remember there was an article from 2010, so the year I graduated school, about the potential of travel coaching. And that was the only thing I'd seen. Anything else I saw with travel coaching was a travel agent who was just interchanging the terms. And so again, I didn't care. I didn't care what people were talking about of it. But as I was building my business and people, that's where criticism would come into play and say, well, there's no such thing as a travel coach. You're a travel agent. I knew for myself that's not what I did, but that criticism I had to use to benefit me, meaning instead of getting angry and frustrated about it, I said, how can I be more clear on what is the difference that I'm not articulating well enough? And once I was able to do that, it kind of just skyrocketed from there. So again, it's business is a journey itself, just like traveling. You learn, you grow, you make mistakes, you fail and you try again, and you just keep on going.
No, I love that, and I think no matter what business it is, which business you're going into, it's going to be the same, isn't it? It's all about the passion, finding out who your ideal clients are, all of that kind of thing. So yes, that's amazing. That is. So you've gone from being totally broke, traveling around all these countries, and for 10 years as well, doing that, going home, saving the money so you can go back again. And of course, that's a lot of years and a lot of traveling as well to learn a lot of things, learning about different cultures. And, so when you kind of went into these different countries, especially somewhere that wasn't Western and was the other side of the world, how did you embrace the culture that you were in and immerse yourself into it?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was traveling. I didn't want to be around the familiar. I didn't want to be, I only speak Spanish. I don't speak any other language other than English and Spanish, but I was never worried about that. We have to think about tourism itself, because that's a limiting belief a lot of people have. Well, I can't travel to certain places because I don't speak the language. That's a very, you're doing yourself a very big disservice to yourself if that's what you think. Tourism is a massive industry that drives a lot of economies. And when we think about the people that travel the most are people from the States, Canadians, Australians, Germans, Western Europeans, and they're all going to speak English. Therefore, countries will accommodate. And if they want to drive tourism, they have to, if some sort, be able to communicate in English. Obviously, not everywhere in the world is going to speak English, but it depends on where you go. But I never let that hold me back. We travel to experience people and places, and being, in areas and around the world where people are so different and their belief systems are different and how they live is different is all part of the journey. It's what really, that's what gives us the experiences, because if we're going to big cities that are so similar to our own cities, what are we really learning and what are we really experiencing? It's those times where we feel out of our comfort zone, where we feel a bit of discomfort, maybe, where we feel challenged, maybe, where we see things we don't usually see, where we hear things we don't usually hear. Those are our moments that we're able to learn, take in, have new perspectives, gain compassion and empathy, and really have these quote unquote transformative experiences.
No, absolutely agree with that. And the thing is, these days it's so easy to research, no matter which country you're going into. Research that country, research their culture, research what do they wear, that type of thing. Because some countries don't like you just wearing a vest top and a pair of shorts. So just respect wherever you go as well. And talking of that, I remember when I emailed you, I asked you about 3 different countries that you've visited that's kind of surprised you, and one of those was Israel. And I thought, well, let's not talk about Israel at the moment because they are going through a bit of a crisis at the moment, aren't they? So I wouldn't mind talking about the other 2. Now, one was Macedonia,
Mhm.
So what surprised you about Macedonia then? Because I was having a bit of a research myself, and what it says is apparently it used to be, no, not apparently, it used to be part of Yugoslavia, and it gained its independence in 91. But apparently Mother Teresa of Calcutta was born there. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I know. Yeah, so that's a fact I found out. But what, yeah, so what did you... I mean, I can cut that out, obviously. I think somebody was FaceTiming me then because I've switched everything off on my laptop. Typical, isn't it? So Macedonia. I was on the website having a little look, and it seems like it's one of the most friendliest countries to go to in the world.
Mhm. Yeah, so I actually didn't even know where Macedonia was or had heard about it before I planned to go there. I was um, spending a lot of time in kind of central and in that um, the Balkan kind of area of Europe, and visiting Croatia and Greece. I started in Turkey, I believe it was, and just worked my way around. And I was posting on Facebook at the time of just my travels. And there was someone that I went to high school with who was in the Peace Corps, and she messaged me and said I was in the Peace Corps in Macedonia. And there's a really pretty place called Lake Ohrid. If you have time, you should go there. Of course, I had time. I didn't plan anything, and I didn't have any, itinerary. So I was like, great, I'll figure out where that is. And so I made my way to Macedonia, Lake Ohrid, Macedonia in particular. And, I fell in love with it because for a couple different reasons. One, I don't like touristy places. So I was like the only non-local. I love that. I love to just live as if that's where I live. Instead of being, when you go to touristy places, you're treated like a tourist. You're treated like, the bargaining on the streets and the hustle, with everything and the big signs of tourist attractions and booking tours and all this stuff. And it's not my thing. So like Ohrid, I only planned to stay there. Honestly, I think it was for just a couple days. And I ended up staying for over a week. The place that I booked was an apartment building that was owned by a Macedonian family, and they lived in the building. It was a grandfather, mom, dad, and two little boys, and they were so welcoming. They gave me a map and showed me, where all the places in town are for groceries and where to hike and where's a castle and just what's around. And they're like, we have a German group in town. Do you want to come dancing with us tonight? And I'm like, no, like, thank you so much. I'm such an introvert, despite being, what I do in my business. I'm a very introverted person. So I say no to like everything. Like, no, that's so sweet, but no, thank you. But they were really kind. I went down and would have breakfast and tea with them. And they just were so curious about me and my travels. And they learned that I loved art. So they asked me if I could draw pictures of their two sons. So I remember the night before leaving, my bus was so early the next day. I was up all night, like doing this sketch for them of their sons. For them. But the town itself, Lake Ohrid, I had heard that it has changed now because of flooding or something. But back then when I went, I don't remember in particular what years it was. But I want to say it was maybe around like 2016-ish time. It was just absolutely beautiful. It kind of looked like you're in the Amalfi Coast in Italy is what the lake looked like. There was a castle you can walk up to, an overview of the lake, and the people were just so nice. And it's a cobblestone little town, and and these are the things that kind of check my boxes. I love these old cobblestone type of towns. I love lakes, bodies of water. I love beautiful scenery, and I just like quieter, non-traditional places. And it was also a nice little break from staying in hostels. I was able to have an apartment with bed and TV and everything too. So I ended up staying a week, and I just was really, in love with it. And then when I was leaving Macedonia and we were on our coach bus, everywhere in that region, you kind of go up the mountain in order to cross the border. And it's always freezing and snowing up there late at night. And I remember something, they were questioning something about one of my identity cards or something like that. And I just remember that it was taking so long, and I felt so bad that I was holding the bus up. But the people, the Macedonians on the bus were like, came back to see if I was okay and make sure
Oh,
the bus waited for me and stuff. It was just like, it really spoke to how beautiful and kind people are around this world, even when you don't know their language and they don't know who you are.
uh, yes, and that's what I love. I love going off the beaten track. I don't like being around touristy areas. It's got its place. I understand that. But for me, I like to go and eat where the locals go and eat. I like to go and shop where the locals go and shop. I want to go wherever they go, and I want to immerse myself in their proper culture and not touristy areas. I love that. Sounds wonderful. I feel like I need to go there. What about the Philippines? The other one was the Philippines. So what about that then? Again, another beautiful country.
Yeah. Well, living in Chicago, Chicago's very diverse. And there happens to be a big Filipino population. So I had a lot of friends that were Filipino, and I was exposed to their food and some of their language. So it was always in the back of my mind that when I go to Asia, I would go to the Philippines. So when I was going to Southeast Asia for the very first time, I went to Japan and then Taiwan, and then I had a flight booked into the Philippines. And the reason I had these flights booked beforehand is because, in particular, when you go to islands in Southeast Asia, in particular, they want to see a return ticket, or a ticket that you're leaving their country, essentially. So I had a couple lined up already, and when I was in Taiwan right before the Philippines, the super typhoon Yolanda went through the Philippines, and I was supposed to fly into Cebu, their second largest city. And I was no longer able to do that because it wasn't safe yet. And so I happen to have some personal injury myself. I get, a weird fact about myself. I get stress fractures on my feet. So I've had to fly home and, relearn to walk and all this stuff. But
Wow.
I had a stress fracture at that time, so I happened to get wheelchaired all the way through 4 international airports back home. And so when I was back home on bed rest for a month, I was I was intending to go back. I was going to continue this trip. I just started. And so I was doing research on the Philippines and waiting for it to be okay to fly back in. So I was seeing, how can I go and help? I had no purpose of going there other than just traveling. So I said, I'm going to go and see how I can help. Volunteering has always been something big to me. I've always spent a lot of time volunteering over the years growing up. And so I wanted to see how I can go and make an impact some way. So I found some organization, a group of people from all over, going to an island called Bantayan. And I messaged them and said, I don't need you to pay for anything for me. I don't need anything from you. Can I come and be with you guys and help? And they said, absolutely. Here's the directions on how to get there when you come from Cebu. So I was able to fly into Cebu, follow these directions on how to get to Bantayan Island, which is just a long bus ride down the coast to a port. The weather was still very bad. Water was choppy, so I had to wait to take the ferry over, and everything was destroyed. Everything. It looked like a tornado hit through it, which essentially is what it, kind of happened. And I lived there for a month, and we did everything that we could possibly do to help. Spent time rebuilding classrooms, cleaning debris up, breaking up bricks, distributing materials that other organizations dropped at the borders or at the ports, playing with the children. So we got to grow these relationships with the Filipino people. They were so welcoming, and they were so kind, and they were so thankful and so giving that, they really, those people, the volunteers, there was a variety of them that would come and go, but there was a core group of them and the people running the organization who ended up living there. And the Filipinos kind of adopted them like their own. And some of them actually lived with some of the families. Some of them end up marrying Filipinos. And I ended up going back 1 or 2 years later, I want to say 2 years later, to the exact same place and seeing everyone, seeing how it was, visiting the friends that I made volunteering, visited the Filipino friends that I made. I stayed with the same exact family that had me 2 years ago. And the kids remembered me. The mom who they gave her money to cook our breakfast, lunch, and dinner when we were volunteers. We had tents on her property. And she remembered that I liked eating healthy food and would go to the market all the time. So it was just the impact and the people of the Philippines that made the biggest impact on me. And then after that, I spent more time traveling around the Philippines more, went to different islands and everything. And it's just absolutely beautiful. Some of the most beautiful beaches and water and people and food, affordability, everything there. So when people are looking for a recommendation to go to that's beyond Thailand, but kind of the similar feel, I always recommend the Philippines.
No, it does. It looks absolutely, it's another place I need to go as well. And we have in the NHS, I can't remember which year it was now, but in the 2000s, we had Filipino nurses coming over because we had such a shortage, and they are just the loveliest, friendliest, warmest people ever. So yeah, I agree with that. They are lovely. Okay, so we've talked a lot. We've absolutely talked a lot. But there's one question I'd like to ask you now as we come to the end. And that is, as you were traveling, was there a piece of music that kind of links you to your travels that, you know, that you used to play or that reminds you of traveling? Was there a piece of music at the time?
Is this supposed to be like an emotional answer, or is it like a funny answer, or any answer?
With me, when I was traveling, Californication came out, you know, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and there was a band called More Cheaper as well. And that epitomized, when I listen to those now, that epitomizes my year away, that year away. So that's what I was wondering. Is there anything, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't, I'm not a huge music person, but I do remember when Pharrell's Happy song came out.
Yeah.
I remember I was in India for the first time, and I thought I always think it's so funny how, and interesting, I shouldn't say funny, it's interesting how, you know, the US is like the capital of movies and music, and that places or people around this world who barely speak English absolutely love, you know, what comes from the US, especially music. And so I was walking around Mumbai into the shops and just down the streets, and I remember hearing the Happy song on, and people knew the words, but yet they didn't speak that much English. But yeah, after a while, I got tired of hearing that song though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, back in the day, it was CDs. I know everything's downloaded these days, but I've still got the CDs as well, you know, from back then. And I put them on now and again. And whenever I hear a song off one of the albums, especially More Sheba, because nobody really hears about them and not many people know about them. So it's just like, it just takes me back, you know, to what I was doing and where I was at that time. So, do you know what? Thank you so much, Sahara, for, you know, joining the podcast today. It's been absolutely amazing. I think we could talk for at least, well, I could talk to you for at least another hour. No problem whatsoever. But yeah, you know, I really, really appreciate you coming on. So where can, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, if anyone is interested in the Travel Coaching Network, then visit thetravelcoachnetwork.com, the Travel Coach Network on Instagram, across all the platforms, Facebook as well. If you want to find me myself, you'll find me as Sahara Rose, the Travel Coach, across all the platforms.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we'll put all that information into the show notes so that you'll be able to contact Sahara whichever way you need to or want to. So once again, thank you so much. And so, fellow wanderers, thanks for listening. And remember, age should never stop your pursuit of adventure. and the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. There we are. I'm just going to stop that now. And that concludes this episode of Wanderlust Diaries, celebrating the fearless spirit of solo female travellers who are 40 and beyond. I hope you found inspiration, valuable insights and a renewed sense of wanderlust. Thank you to all our incredible listeners who have joined us on this exciting journey. Remember, age should never stop your quest for adventure because the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. And don't forget to join our community on social media to connect with fellow travellers and subscribe and review us on your favourite podcast platform. All links are in the show notes. Keep dreaming, keep exploring and stay fearless. Until next time, this is Terry Reynolds signing off from Wanderlust Diaries. Psst, don't keep me a secret. Please tell your friends and fellow travellers.